Yesterday, Republican Senator Ted Cruz clapped back at critics who called him out for, of all things, denouncing Uganda's anti-gay law. He doubled down in a tweet directed at the detractor, saying, quote, "Jenna, not sure why you're defending this barbaric Ugandan law. It imposes life imprisonment for consenting adults who engage in gay sex. That's ridiculous. You or I may or may not agree with their choices, but consenting adults should not go to jail for what they do in their own bedrooms."
Cruz particularly drew the ire from some social conservatives. He went back and forth with a former GOP Senate candidate, Lauren Witzke, who has vehemently spoken out against Pride Month and protections for the LGBT community. Twitter users have had a field day in trolling Witzke's anti-gay postings. Ted Cruz's defense of gay people in Uganda comes just a month after he called for an investigation of Anheuser-Busch for their campaign with Dylan Mulvaney. He's also voted against the Respect for Marriage Act, which gave statutory protections to same-sex marriages in the U.S. So the thing with the Ugandan law, so I saw some, so he said this is obviously
it's a bad
evil.
law.
Then the pushback came that some people were saying, well, this only prescribes the death penalty for gay people who have sex with children or who spread HIV to other people. And it's true that the death penalty was only prescribed for those things, but it was still giving imprisonment for just consenting adults having gay sex.
Yeah.
And anyway, that shouldn't be the...
It was remarkable to watch. So there's a couple of questions here I have. The first one is, what do you think provoked Ted Cruz to weigh in on this issue right now? I have some theories. Do you have any?
I want to hear your theories first.
Okay, this might be too, like I'm like galaxy braining this, but potentially Ted Cruz might be looking around, having some questions about whether or not the Republican Party is making the right bets on the culture war, feeling the need to put some stakes in the ground, saying we're only going to go so far. And this Ugandan law seemed like an easy one that most people can disagree on. It's bad to throw people in jail just for consenting adults having sex in their homes for being gay, right? And so let me assure the public that Republicans haven't gone so crazy that we're not willing to say the easy thing, which is that this authoritarian Ugandan law is bad. What do you make of it? Do you think that this is maybe evidence of some concern among traditional Republicans that some of this Ron DeSantis culture war stuff is going too far?
Yeah, I have no idea. I think it's, yes, a good idea to... I see it more in like a rah-rah America. Like, America is a good country compared to Uganda because we don't, execute people for homosexuality.
Right.
Something we can all get on board with.
But we did also used to have plenty of criminal statutes that did criminalize exactly this kind of behavior. And the laws that decriminalized it, the Supreme Court rulings relied on privacy rights and privacy interests to do exactly that in cases like Lawrence v. Texas, which is why a lot of people after the Dobbs decision basically said, we're getting rid of that privacy right rationale. And Clarence Thomas specifically recalled several other privacy right style cases saying, I don't know about the future of these, that people were concerned that we were going to backtrack to a world where we could, again, leave it up to the states to criminalize those kind of behaviors if they wanted to.
Sure, but as with some of the abortion stuff, one could think that one could agree with Thomas, for instance, who said that he doesn't think the Constitution prohibits states from having these policies. Not that he thinks this policy is a good policy. He just doesn't think the Constitution forbids states from doing that.
This is the dance that everyone does about states' rights. Over and over again, historically, the idea of states' rights has been used to eliminate federal protections for historically marginalized communities so that states can then pass laws that attack them in exactly the way that these laws, which Ted Cruz is ostensibly saying he objects to, at least when they're in Uganda, did once exist in America and would probably exist in America again.
And you have to win at the ballot box if you want the policies to be one way or the other.
No. There are policies that might win on a state level, but not on a federal level, and that's the conflict that we're looking at right now. Whether or not, so the question is, should a state be able to abrogate people's free speech rights and get rid of the First Amendment? No, we have decided as a country that there are some things that are above state consideration because they're basic fundamental rights. We have enshrined those in our Constitution.
Well, but it's the two-step, though, because, as written, the First Amendment only prohibits the federal government from violating.
Sure, but the point is,
but then the subsequent.
Sure, but this isn't just about the First Amendment. It's all of the amendments. The whole point is that we have some constitutionally protected rights on a federal level, and that historically those rights have been protecting people who are marginalized because they're minority
And some
religious groups.
Don't think
or
privacy is one
groups.
of them because it doesn't specifically
the problem is that we live in a world where we do not have even though the popular opinion is the same as Ted Cruz's, which is that you shouldn't throw people in jail for having gay consensual sex, that we don't have a legislative body that would be likely to pass a law like that. Do you think that we live in a world where Republicans, despite the obviousness of what Ted Cruz is saying, would pass a constitutional amendment to protect gay sex in this way that would protect it from state incursion, even if privacy rights were eliminated by the Supreme Court?
Such a thing would pass. There was a recent, I don't remember specifically what the issue was, but there was an LGBT issue at the federal level that got some Republican support and had
some Republican support, and passing both chambers is a very different thing. So this is what's so interesting about this. So Ted Cruz tweets this.
Well, if it gets all the Democratic support, it gets some Republican support, it passes.
Well, that's a big question, especially if it's framed specifically about this particular issue, which is gay sex. Do you think we're going to be able to get a majority of the House, including whatever it is, 6 or Republicans or whatever you would need, to cross the border for a constitutional.
Shouldn't be punishable by death? Yes.
No, you pointed this out. It wasn't punishable by death. It's against imprisonment. So it would basically be a constitutional amendment protecting the rights of gay people the same way that we have the 14th Amendment, et cetera, protecting the rights of black people and other specific groups that are provided for in the Constitution.
I mean, in the same way you got some people voting against a federal anti-lynching law, not because they think it should be okay to lynch people, but because that's shouldn't preempt state policies on that.
The point I'm trying to make is that when you look at the comments under Ted Cruz's post, although you might say, well, obviously Americans would support a constitutional amendment to protect the rights of gay people to have consensual sex, the comments suggest a very different American is emerging. And there's a question as to whether, and this is an open question, there's a question as to whether the Ron DeSantis wing of the party that is making wokeism the central facet of its entire political project is getting radically to the right of where Americans are, and frankly, potentially dragging America to the right with them. Going from a place where in 2016, Donald Trump very proudly sold pride merchandise, and I think that Donald Trump could and did say things like, of course, gays are welcome in the Republican Party. I think we're getting to a place where there are many people who would say no.
He specifically said we love and will protect our LGBTQ citizens. He said that in his speech. Peter Thiel, who is openly gay, gave a speech right before that saying he's proud and happy to be an out gay Republican, and it drew tons of cheers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's Trump.
Yeah.
And that's Ted Cruz being in a very normie place on this.
Right.
And then we have the comments underneath, which to me reflect a different kind of sentiment that is both being evoked by, wait a minute. But it's both being evoked by Ron DeSantis and, frankly, as people pointed out and as we read in the intro, are also indicative of some of the positions that Ted Cruz himself has taken over the years. So I think that liberals have been trying to make this argument that there is a connection between pushing for some of this anti-trans bathroom legislation. He voted against the Respect for Marriage Act. We're saying you're making this argument.
Well, he doesn't support same-sex marriage. I mean, many Republicans don't. Okay, a majority of the country does, but
so people are making
a majority of Republicans
don't. This is the case that liberals have been making, and they've been told that they were, being exaggerating and hyperbolic this entire time. The case that they are making is that promoting some of these laws, and that Ron DeSantis taking it even further and making it the central facet of his entire political project, are having the effect of making it so that we once were in a country where even Republicans like Donald Trump said, hey, gay people have a right to live here, be protected by the country's laws, to a place where there's a vocal majority of people who won't even, or vocal minority of people, I should say, who won't even agree with this statement that a Ugandan law that says you're thrown in jail for having consensual gay sex is a problem.
I suppose, but you could say the same thing about the LGBT activist movement. You could say that by pushing at the margins some activists on trans issues or for children specifically, you have risked tainting or associating the entire LGBT project with a much more controversial and much less broadly popular stance.
But those people aren't running for president. Ron DeSantis is. And the tee-up, the contrast between the old guard, what is now this like kind of weirdly classical seeming old guard Republican and Donald Trump, who's seeming, he's the tolerant left in this situation, versus Ron DeSantis. I think that this Ted Cruz statement is testing the waters of this culture war.
I don't know why Ron DeSantis is any more liable for invoking the or pushing people in an anti-gay direction by this logic than, again, activists who are pushing at the margins of public opinion on trans
because
issues.
I think he has a much bigger platform, and he's running for president of the United States, and he's the governor of Florida, and he's passed these laws, as opposed to somebody on lives at TikTok with pink hair who's just sitting making annoying videos in the back of their car.
Well, what do you think about this? We'd love to hear from you. More Rising right after this.